The Dancing with Depression podcast is brought to you by CAS-CM, where CM stands for Content Matters, because content brings people together. Content warning: some episodes of the Dancing with Depression podcast discusses sensitive mental health topics, including suicidal thoughts, self-harm, trauma, and emotional distress. Listener discretion is strongly advised. If you need immediate support, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. For additional non-emergency mental health assistance, the NAMI helpline is available at 1-800-950-NAMI. That's 1-800-950-6264. Also, the Dancing with Depression podcast shares personal stories, lived experiences, and open conversations about mental health. While these discussions can offer insight and connection, this podcast is not therapy and should not be used as a substitute for counseling, diagnosis, or medical treatment. We are not mental health professionals, and the information shared here is for supportive and educational purposes only. If you are struggling with your mental health, please seek guidance from a licensed mental health provider. The stories, viewpoints, and opinions expressed by guests are their own and reflect their personal experiences. They do not replace professional advice. If hearing these topics bring concerns for you, or if you need help navigating your own mental health journey, please reach out to a qualified professional or call or text 988 for immediate support, as well as the NAMI helpline at 1-800-950-NAMI. That's 1-800-950-6264, which is also available for information, resources, and non-crisis support. Welcome to the Dancing with Depression podcast. I'm your host, Adam Turner. If you've never been to therapy, you might not know what to expect. My only understanding of it came from watching The Sopranos. Dramatic, intense, sometimes a little scary. The truth? It's very different. So it was only fitting to invite my first therapist, Giselle Schochet. Okay, so before we go down memory lane, I want to set the stage for today's conversation. If you've never been to therapy before, or if you've considered going but weren't really sure what to expect, this episode is designed for you. We're going to break down what the first session really looks like so you can feel a little more at ease with a process that really just typically is kind of uncomfortable at first. What's cool is you're going to hear it from both sides, right? My perspective as a client, which I still want to refer to myself as a patient, but anyways, who has had that experience. And then we're also going to get a perspective of an expert, Giselle, who guides people through this pretty much every day. So speaking of experts, I'm joined by someone who played an important role in my own personal mental health journey. She holds a Master of Science and is a licensed marriage and family therapist, Giselle Schochet.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Oh, it's great to see you. And we want to talk a little bit about what that first appointment or scheduling is like from a different perspective. But before we dive in, can you share just a little bit about kind of your professional background, some of the experience in places that you've worked, and what ultimately led you into this line of work?
So I've been in private practice for 28 years, and I started out as an intern going through my master's program at a pastoral counseling center. That's where I got my start. And from there, I think I worked there for about 5 years while I was working towards my licensure, because you have to get a certain number of client face-to-face hours to sit for the board to get your license. And then, unfortunately, that pastoral counseling center went out of business. So myself and one of my colleagues went and opened up our own practice. And we were very fortunate, of course, because we were able to take a lot of those clients with us. So that was nice. I also have worked in emergency departments, three of them I no longer work in emergency departments, but I worked in three of them for about 20 years at the same time as I was doing private practice. And that is an entirely different situation and a wonderful way to get experience with every mental health issue you can imagine. I really, really enjoy that. Now I'm just in private practice and kind of easing into retirement. So I want to say to anyone who's listening that this is my first time doing a podcast and I am scared to death. So I want anyone to understand that everything new is scary. You just have to take that leap of faith and take the first step and make that phone call. And if someone doesn't call you back, it doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It means that they're not giving good customer service. That's all that means. So as far as how I got to doing therapy, you'll probably find that no one gets into this business without having their own story. And we all have our own story. I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. I was the youngest of five and never felt like I had a voice around the house. And I didn't suffer physical abuse, but my brothers did. And I just always felt like I needed to understand how someone could be so awful to another person. And so that was a big part of it. And then when I was probably around eighth grade, I had a traumatic experience where I was chased by some men in a box truck. And that was really scary for me. And so my mother took me to therapy. And while I don't remember really anything about it, I just know it didn't work for me. I didn't feel comfortable. The person didn't make me comfortable. So that was something else that I wanted to make sure the people I saw were very comfortable. Like it was almost, in your living room talking over a cup of coffee. And that's kind of how I've done my practice.
And that translated because, I felt that. I didn't know the backstory. I didn't know how you got into being a therapist, but I did feel like at times we were just sitting there chopping it up. And so that was nice. And that really is kind of the dynamics. Like you mentioned, you were young. Not that you went to therapy, quote unquote, against your will, but you didn't really know what was going on. I went willingly, even though I kind of was misled, but we'll talk about that later on. So that really being the part is what should someone expect or can they expect going into their first therapy session from your knowledge? What would you like them to think about?
Well, I think in this day and age of technology, it has changed from when I first started. Now, generally, I think people send a packet over the internet and you fill out your history and why you're coming and that kind of thing. So we have a head start on how to structure the first visit. So that can make it a little more clinical than I prefer it to be because it's almost like we just jump in instead of just kind of an organic learning about you and what's going on in your life. But so I don't know if that's across the United States that therapists do that, but that's how I operate my business. You would get a list of questions to answer. And then when you come in, I just talk about first, I try and make you at ease, of course, because just like I am today, very nervous, you are going to be nervous if it's your first time going into a therapist's office. So it's a time for you to interview the therapist. as well as a therapist to understand you a little bit to make sure that they have the specialty to meet your needs. So I think one of the things I want people to understand is that it's not somewhere where you're going to be judged at all. It's somewhere where you can have a conversation and you have an 50 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour where someone is really just paying attention to you without distractions. And it's probably the first time in our lives that we're doing that because there's always distractions. So that's one of the things I really enjoy about therapy is it's just one-on-one, or in my case, I'm a marriage and family therapist, so it could be a family, but we're just there together, really connecting.
And you talked about, wanting to kind of set the stage of being comfortable and such. Are there any techniques or things that you do specifically as you're sitting across from someone, or even, if you're doing telehealth and maybe you're picking up that
Mhm.
they're nervous, you're picking up different sides. Is there anything specific that you do to kind of help through that process?
Well, people tell me that I do make them feel at ease. So, and I think that's because I know what it was like for me to go into this office with
Mm.
someone who was going to read my mind or something. I think I thought at first when I was younger. It's intimidating, right? You're telling your most inner thoughts. And I take that as a very humbling experience for me. I value that people are willing to share things that they wouldn't share with maybe even their best friend. So I take that very
Hmm.
seriously. I also try and bring in humor. I will tell them that, for instance, my mother told me everybody wasn't going to like me, and that is certainly the case. And that's okay. We're not everybody's cup of tea. And if I'm not the right fit for you, go somewhere else. And I will help you go somewhere else. I will not take offense to that. And I hope that other therapists operate in the same way because I know how difficult it is. And if I can put that person at ease so that they're willing to come back again, that's a big deal. And I take that very seriously.
Yeah, and I think that that's extremely, extremely important and something that I didn't realize until after 3 or 4 therapists that I had successful times with, right? And whether it be because I moved or because they changed their practice and didn't accept my insurance, or they started a family and stopped for a while, and I had to seek out another therapist, and I remember I remember it going there. She had a office in her home, and it was a beautiful office. She was very experienced, and she literally had me lie down on a leather couch, and I was, like, repeating some, like, poems or sayings or something, and the entire time I was just like, No, this is not for me." And I would have called Bobby the second I got outside the door, but I wanted to wait until I got into the car because I didn't want her to hear me, the therapist, and I was explaining to her what happened, and I was like, "What do I do?" Like, she's like, "You just let her know that it wasn't a connection, and you move on." And I was like, "What do you mean? Like, I can do that?"
Yes.
She's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I didn't know that." And that's what, this is about. You're not tied to
Uh-uh.
the person. If it's not a connection, it's not a connection, right? And so that's the thing that I want people to realize is you're still in control. Like you said earlier, you're interviewing them just as
Yep.
much as they're sharing, if they're a fit for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? It works both
Yep.
ways. So now that we've kind of got that initial line of questioning, what to think about, what to look for, what should or can someone expect from therapy? Meaning, not end results, but like, what's a good goal? Like, as far as first time meeting somebody and how much are you going to share
Yeah.
versus the uncertainty?
Believe it or not, that first session goes by very quickly because there's a lot of things you're covering. You're covering, what brings them in, how hard it was for them to get there, any concerns they have. Things that people often ask are you going to put me on medication? Well, first of all, I don't prescribe. I can't prescribe with my license. I do work with people who do prescribe, but that, I say, hold up, let's wait on that. That's not the first order of business. I prefer to work on behavioral changes, maybe mindfulness, like breathing and changing what we call distorted thoughts. Like, how you can think the worst case scenario if you're prone to that. How can we kind of slow your thinking down so that you're not feeling so overwhelmed by things that seem scary, for example. And then, way kind of pretty far down the line, we look at medication. That's not a first order of business for me in particular. Okay. I think medication
Mhm.
there's definitely a place for that, but let's see if we can do it with some training of what we call rewiring the brain. And that's not a technical term. That's just, we have ways of doing things that become natural. And it's kind of like a roadmap in our brain. And so when we try to change our behavior, it takes practice, right? Otherwise, you just resort to the same way of doing things. So we work on practicing a new behavior over time. And then people see really good changes. It's really exciting. Does that answer your question?
It does. I've changed the thought of I can't do this ever
Mm-hmm.
to I'm going to learn something from this. And, situations where I talk about, when I would get ready to fly, I don't like to fly, right? And so I wouldn't suppress my feelings because I don't think that that's the way to do it. I would acknowledge it, but then I would question and be like, is it really probable of what I'm thinking that's going to happen? Probably not,
Uh-huh.
right? And so it helps me kind of guide through that process. It's not that you're going to a therapist to, have them tell you what to do. What they're trying to do is guide you to get to your own conclusion, right? And that, I think, is not something that many of us
Right.
are used to because, as you said, you pointed out and said an unbiased opinion or an unbiased position. Like, my parents love me to death and they might want to give me good advice, but they also know everything about me. And sometimes that's not helpful. Sometimes you need somebody to be able to just come in and help you guide through whatever it is you're trying to navigate. But it is ultimately going to be your decision and what your conclusion is. And I want that to be stressed because that's the goal. So, along those lines, and this was something that I think is important, I have shared very candidly that my first experience was essentially my decision. And I think that that plays a big part in the future feelings about therapy, right? As opposed to somebody who might have been placed there not against their will, but either too young to make the decision themselves or felt like they were forced into it, right? How does that dynamic play a part from your side when you see somebody coming in that came willingly versus maybe not feeling that way?
Mm-hmm. Well, so what you're referring to might be someone that has to come in through the court, for example, for drug and alcohol evaluation. They're coming in kicking and screaming, before they get through the door. and they put it off until the last minute. Generally, it's not like, oh, my lawyer tells me I should do this, I better get right on that. No, they wait until the very last minute, and I'm or the therapist is perceived as sort of the enemy. So again, I just kind of try and lighten this up and acknowledge that I know you don't want to be here. I get that. Let's just get through it and do what we have to do. And maybe, just maybe, you might get something out of it. And let's see. I'm certainly not expecting to turn this person's life around or change their mind in one sitting. But, it's a start. Let's start. That's all I try to say. I once had a teen in my office. I probably saw her for 3 times. And the first time I tried my general, probably corny jokes or something, a kid just looked at me like, oh my God, and rolled her eyes. And she would not say a word, not a word. She came 3 times. She never said a word. And finally, she didn't come anymore. And her
Oh my
mother
God.
said, yeah, she's not coming. Well, when that girl turned about 30 years old, who called my office and wanted to come in? It was that girl. That was humbling. It made such a difference in my life because even though we didn't, on paper, do anything, clearly she had a level of trust and wanted to try it again. And we did great work together. And that situation I'm very proud of. So even if you don't think it can work, give it a try.
That is awesome. And I think that really kind of paints a bigger picture, which is timing, right? She just might not have been in the space that she needed. And I joke, but I'm very serious. I feel like I matured much later than many of my friends, which is okay.
Well, you did. No, I'm kidding.
It's part of the charm that had me call you back. You had mentioned 3 sessions with her, and we've kind of had conversation. What recommendation how many times do you kinda give it to get an indication? I shared candidly, first time I knew in that particular situation, I was good, but
Yep. Yep.
overall.
So I generally tell people, give it 3 sessions before you make up your mind, especially if you're in the direction of, I'm not doing this. Now, where you were saying you went to that first one and how she had you lay on the couch just didn't feel comfortable. You got to follow your gut, and you did. Maybe that would have turned out differently. We don't know. But I always say, you got to follow your gut. But if you know that you are just kind of being hesitant to go, your heart's not in it, that's kind of different than I think what you experienced. You just felt very too vulnerable and exposed. And that's what I'm gathering. It didn't feel comfortable lying there.
Right. Also, I had had good experiences in other therapy, so I knew, I think, a little bit more about what I was comfortable with, and I think it was just the technique or the style, to your point, that just didn't jive. So, yeah.
But generally, if you are one of those people that is just so hesitant to go and you're going, kind of tongue-in-cheek to make somebody else happy, give it like 3 sessions. The first session, you're just meeting the person, both parties, yourself and the therapist. Believe it or not, the therapist is nervous too, because every time we meet someone new, it's a little nerve-wracking. But by the second time, you're getting a better feel, and you're kind of deciding, yeah, I think I could let this person in and let my guard down a little bit. By the third session, you generally know, is this a good fit or not? And again, follow your gut on that. But look at it from, am I just being stubborn or guarded?
Yeah, guarded. I think guarded is a good one.
Yeah. And if that's getting in the way, then you need to ask yourself, is this about me and I need to try and be more open? Or is there something about this person that you just don't feel like you can open up to? If that's the case, go to someone else, because there will be someone that you do click with and you will let down that guard.
Yes. Yeah.
And therapists are there to help you reach your potential. And that is key. Like, we all have potential. We don't even know what that is, but let's explore it and let's open up things to give you the help you need to be the best you can be. That's what it's all about.
It is. It is. And I think that is such a perfect transition. I have an observation that I want to share with you, and then kind of a final question. So, what I find kind of funny is how similar our experiences ended up. Yours with coming on the podcast, and mine with starting therapy. I talked in a previous episode about my first group therapy session, how within the first 6 minutes, I was convinced I had made a terrible mistake. Right? I was uncomfortable, I was distracted, and quite frankly, I was questioning everything. And honestly, the same thing happened when I first asked you 2 years ago to be a guest on a podcast that didn't exist yet. It was a thought in my mind. And when I first brought it up to you, you seemed like a deer in headlights. And I was a little thrown off. And then fast forward, I've got episodes, real stories, sharing some real shit that I'm going through. And so I reached back out and I invited you again. And you kind of weren't sure what you would, quote unquote, be bringing to the table, and was nervous. And I'm sitting here like, if I can do this, you can definitely do it. But I completely forgot in the moment that it took me a year to say the words into a microphone that I had written just introducing the purpose of the podcast, right? And so I had to take a step back and I had to remind myself that I had the chance to process whatever it was that I needed to process, that I needed to give you the same time to process that. And even though we both had moments of doubt with our particular, situations, that we were able to move forward. We learned some tools, each of us, that allowed us not to get rid of the nerves, because we were still scared shitless, right? It's fine. That's okay. But it went to knowing that we can take steps further. So for me, my reward has been discovering, what it feels like to actually live again instead of just trying to survive. And your reward for getting through that process is you've now unlocked the achievement of becoming a potential reoccurring guest on the Dancing with Depression podcast anytime you want to come back on. Just putting that out there. Because now you're an expert in podcasting.
I am an expert, yes.
So we had a chance to talk about some things that people can look for. And at the end of the day, this is really about understanding that it's a safe space, that it is okay that it feels a little awkward, a little weird. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's normal. It's aligned. What I want to give you the opportunity is, are there any questions you want to ask me?
Well, that's loaded. I mean,
I know, and I don't prepare you for that either, so.
Can I drift into one other thing just for your listeners?
Absolutely.
there's differences between therapy, right? There's different theories that people follow, and there's going to be different tools in their toolbox depending on which theory they believe helps people the most. Okay. That being said, you've probably heard, your guests have probably heard that there are social workers and therapists and marriage and family therapists and counselors. That can all in and of itself be confusing for people when they're first venturing into going to therapy. So I just wanted to point out that licensed clinical social workers work most often with individuals, and there are also licensed alcohol and drug counselors, also working mostly with individuals. And then marriage and family therapists, which is what I am, works with individuals, couples, families. But the main thing is that marriage and family therapists work from like relational, how our family of origin has impacted us and how the dynamics to this day, we all kind of dread going to our family for Thanksgiving, because so and so is going to do their usual yelling or what have you. And that's what I love about marriage and family therapy is because it gets down to how we can better operate in the same family that has driven us around the bend forever. But this year, we're going to go with a different attitude. We're going to look at people from a perspective that is kinder, that understands that they have a history too. They, like our parents, they came from a family that did certain things that made them do certain things with us, etc. And so if you're looking for that kind of thing, I would go to a licensed marriage and family therapist.
No, I think that is such a great point because we're talking about that connection and how you identify it. And like you said, there's so many different areas that get covered. And not that I wanted to make fun of myself, but, there are those standard questions that everybody asks, your availability and, do you take my insurance? But then there's that second level of questions. Mine happen to be, are you married? And so that plays an incredible part in that process. So thank you for that, because that is extremely helpful and a part of that.
And I want to be clear, Adam, that I think being asked that over the phone, you asking me if I was married, was less intimidating than maybe if we were sitting in our first session, because that you don't ask your therapist if they're married generally. It could be misconstrued as to what you're doing. So
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. Didn't even think of that.
remember, we're all people and we put our pants on one leg at a time. And when you ask a woman, are you married? We're brought up short. Like, why are you asking me
I
that?
hadn't even thought
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But that didn't happen. That didn't happen on the phone because I knew where you were coming from. But just to prove the point,
Right.
context makes a big difference. Okay.
Yes. Yes. That's wow. All right. Well, got me. I get it. I just had never. Oh my God, that's crazy. Ah.
Got off on
So
a little tangent there.
thank you for that. Yeah, yeah. And so going back to, and again, if you have any questions, if you don't, that's fine. But I just wasn't sure if there was anything that, you wanted to ask me or.
Now that you mention it again, yeah, I do. Is there any one thing that has helped you that you can think of with therapy that just the light bulb went off for you and really helped?
Oh, I mean, there's definitely several things, but if I had to kind of hone in on one thing, it's the processing of
Mm.
something. And sometimes it's because I'm able to hear it out
Mm.
loud as opposed to just internalizing it. But it also gives me a chance to, it's not that I pause, but it feels like there's time where I'm able to hear or think of things that in the moment I'm not
Mm.
able to. I am a very emotional and reactive person, and then oftentimes find myself having to pick up the pieces because I
Mhm.
reacted instead of taking a step back
Yeah.
and
Yep. Yep.
processing. And so I got a chance to see what thinking does because Bobby's a thinker,
Mhm.
right? And I share very candidly, like, she doesn't say
Right.
something just to hear her voice. There's usually great intent behind it, which came from that's not how I was. And I'm still a mix, but the therapy has provided me a perspective and tools to help me do that. And so I think that is where I was able to benefit the most was having an unbiased person have no skin in the game as to the
Mm.
end result, meaning it was really just about me. It was about helping me find
Mhm.
my way and going back to what we said, which is guide me to my own
Right.
conclusions. And so that ability to process, even if it's for a second, is
Mhm.
been extremely helpful. And I've found myself not being in the same stressful situations that I had been in the past to which
Mm.
I've created because I
Yes.
was so
Yeah.
reactive. I've been able to
Good.
avoid them and be able to say, hey, you know what? I get it. If I just do this, we're going to avoid
Right.
so much chaos. And one of the other things that I learned that was been incredibly helpful is, especially with anxiety, I was using so much energy trying to prevent something from happening. I was so damn tired that when something actually happened, I didn't have any energy left to deal with it. And so I've learned to stop trying to stop something from happening and learn how to deal with something when it happens. So the therapy helped me with that. But when I first heard that, it was my mom. They were foster parents to
Oh.
several children. And one in particular, she had been with them since the age of 13. And she was like around 17 at the time. And I was visiting and I basically heard a conversation between my mom and Yvonne. And I was looking at my mom and I'm like, you're not going to stop her? Like she's about to make a mistake. And she's like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean no? Like, she goes, yeah. She goes, I'm not here to stop her from making a mistake. I'm here to support her when she's made a
Wow.
mistake to understand why she doesn't want to have that happen again or so on and so forth. And I was
Wow.
like, holy
Wow.
crap. You did that your whole life with us, and I'm just realizing that. We
Yep.
made mistakes. We did some
Yeah.
dumb
Yeah.
shit, but it was in the lesson
Mhm.
afterwards. That's where we need it for the most. And that's where I think a therapist comes in is we've been through stuff, we've done stuff, but now that we've gotten it, can you help us understand maybe better why we did it and how not to do it again?
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, there's so much we could talk about here. So you've touched on a few things, and I would like to talk more about this, but our resilience, you know, every single one of us has been through so much in our lives. It's not a comparison game, but it doesn't matter what each thing is particularly, just to realize that we are here, we're still standing, and we are capable of so much more than we believe. And that's what therapy brings out, is that we're going to be okay. We just need some help. And don't be afraid to ask for it.
Perfectly said. That's exactly it. Giselle, thank you for your time, your expertise, and most important to me, your trust. I can't thank you enough. This is going to resonate with folks in helping them take that next step. With that being said, I hope to hear your voice again. I know I will. I hope you're willing to share your voice again, and we'll, as it falls, we'll talk about that. But it's been fun. It's been a pleasure, and I hope you got as much out of this as I did.
I totally did. And you know what? People out there, this was not as hard as I thought it would be. And I enjoyed it. So thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, that will conclude. And until next time, we will see you soon. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Dancing with Depression. There's a saying that hindsight is 20/20, which is often used to describe the phenomenon of being able to see things more clearly after they've happened. With that in mind, I encourage you to reflect back on past experiences in an effort to better understand your now. Also, I invite you to share with me your comments, thoughts, or personal exposure to depression. You can email me at dancingwithdepression@yahoo.com. Until next time, keep moving forward, and when it comes to depression, remember to take the lead.